Why is your favorite game your favorite game? Is it because of the story, the gameplay that never gets old? Maybe it's the first one that you ever played. Whatever that reason may be, has it made your favorite game become your most played game? At first glance, it stands to reason that those two games would be one and the same. You like a certain game more than every other one, so you want to play that one the most. But in actuality, I've rarely found that to be the case. The amount of hours we pour into a title has little bearing on how much we actually value that time. Yet every time there's a new release, there's always a vocal minority running a cost-benefit analysis and trying to quantify the amount of fun that they're going to get per dollar spent on a game. Spider-Man 2 only takes 20 hours to complete a $70 game. Nah, man, I can't do that. That's $3.50 per hour of playtime. Man, I can't do that. I can do $1.50 maximum. Yet those same people will cop the latest Call of Duty, which has a 5-hour campaign, mind you, and rationalize it by saying, well, multiplayer effectively offers infinite playtime, so the game is infinitely worth it. A couple days ago, the CEO of Take-Two, the company that publishes GTA, made a statement that he believes video games should be priced based on how much playtime they offer, and he threw together a quick little formula that he thinks companies should use to determine the value of their games. Unsurprisingly, the $70 games should be longer crowd got mad quiet. The simple fact is that people don't run their entertainment through an algorithm to decide what they want to spend their money on. People usually use this logic to disparage games that they had no interest in playing to begin with. I'm not convinced they believe this shit either. Last year, Polish game studio Techland made the mistake of drinking the Kool-Aid and tweeted with their whole chest that their new game would take 500 hours to complete. Nobody liked that. No game is released with 500 hours of meaningfully unique content. If you want to play any game for an extended period of time, it goes without saying that you're going to have to do some replaying. Running back a game of Smash is replaying. Starting over with a different character class in an RPG spices things up a bit, but you're still replaying the same game. A game's capacity to keep things fresh beyond the initial playthrough is its replay value, which is a metric that I've never cared for when making a purchase or looking back at my favorites. I once asked a friend of mine who played a lot of CSGO if Counter-Strike was his favorite game, and he just looked at me like I called him the nastiest slur. Hell no, it's not CSGO. My favorite game is Ocarina of Time. I don't know where you got that idea from. Yeah, bro, I don't know where I got that idea either. Sitting at a collective 500 million hours played, Counter-Strike is consistently the most played game on Steam, but I rarely hear anybody calling it their GOAT. In fact, I don't see a lot of these games popping up in top 10 lists. How does Farming Simulator maintain such a strong player base? Why does the entire population of the Bahamas queue up for some games of Dota 2 every single day? Overwatch 2's Steam reviews look like this, but its concurrent player numbers look like this.
Who are you people?
My favorite game of all time is NieR Automata. I really like NieR Automata. I really like NieR Automata, but I've hardly ever mentioned it on my channel. While scrolling through my Steam library, I noticed that there's not a single game that I've played less recently than NieR. Even the ones that I beat before playing it, I've revisited those games before picking back up my favorite. I spent some 30 hours with the game and that was that. I was content with that single playthrough. Anytime the topic of replay value is mentioned, there's always one type of game that gets the shaft. Games that place a great deal of emphasis on a linear story are believed to have less replayability than those that don't. Incessant cutscenes, exposition dumping, mandatory fetch quests, walk and talk sections. All of these things are usually engaging the first time around, but become a chore on subsequent playthroughs. Yet, God of War, The Last of Us, and Persona 5 are some of the most beloved games of the last decade. No title is inherently better or worse for being narrative focused. Video games aren't just a single genre, but an entire medium of entertainment. Different types of games will scratch a different itch. Take the 2018 indie title, Greece. It costs $15 and takes about 3 hours to complete. That's $5 per hour. I'm gonna be honest, it's already looking kinda rough for you. It's a puzzle platformer that delivers a minimalistic story about a young girl's battle with grief following the loss of her mother. It's immediately evident that the devs had something to say, and they chose an interactive art form to say it. The game has these striking watercolor visuals and an incredible score. The atmosphere and sound design perfectly complement the game's melancholy tone. And the gameplay? It's aight. It does a fine job of offering an engaging way to interact with the game's themes, but it's definitely not the main attraction here. It leaves a lot to be desired when it comes to replay value. Once you know how to solve the puzzles, there's no challenge. The game has no fail states, you literally can't lose. It has one hidden cutscene, no alternate endings, no unlockable characters, but that's not a bug, it's a feature. Some games are designed to be an experience rather than to keep you playing indefinitely, and I don't think that makes them worth any less. $15 for 3 hours is a fair trade-off for if that was 3 hours well spent. Conversely, last year's breakout indie hit, Vampire Survivors, cost a third of that price, and I've played it for 5 times as many hours.
Hey kid, you wanna buy some drugs?
What are drugs?
What are drugs? Well, they're...
Vampire Survivors is a game where you move your character around and that's it, that's all you do. It's a game you play with one hand, but unironically. Your character attacks automatically, fighting off an endlessly increasing horde of monsters. You level up as you pick up XP gems, allowing you to upgrade your gear by getting new weapons, cooldown reduction, damage multipliers, and so on. As the enemies grow more powerful and numerous, you also get stronger, until you're an unstoppable force, shooting blades and beams from every orifice and turning the screen into an incomprehensible mess of mangled monsters, bright lights, and damage numbers. Pour one out for the epileptic homies. Y'all missing out. This shit is Coke. A cola. Back when it had cocaine in it. The game is so absurdly simple, yet somehow so engaging. There's no deep lore to the game. There's a bestiary. The stages have a short description and that's all you need to know. There are vampires. Get in there and survive. At least for as long as you can. Want to try again? The game's entire appeal comes from its straightforward yet addictive gameplay loop. From the jump, it's obvious that these two titles aren't trying to do the same thing. They take extremely different approaches to game design, and only one of them really lends itself to being replayed, and that's by design. The most replayable games are the ones where most of your enjoyment is derived from the gameplay and nothing else. It doesn't need an abundance of content, constant updates, or every playthrough to be different. Sure, Vampire Survivors has a ton of unique enemies, items, and synergies, but how much does that really change? Monsters only differ in their speeds, tankiness, and contact damage. New items open up new builds that all ultimately end in your character autonomously vomiting pretty colors. They don't alter how you play the game. It's the moment-to-moment gameplay being so damn good that keeps you coming back. I would extend this to other roguelike games as well. Procedurally generated elements don't give a game unlimited replayability. The amount of factors that meaningfully differ between playthrough to playthrough are far from infinite. These games are designed so multiple runs are practically unavoidable during your first completion, and the best ones work this looping mechanic into the story. You'll inevitably encounter a lot of the same content. Hades isn't going to feel like a brand new game 70 runs deep. Not knowing what rooms, enemies, or items you'll see is part of the gameplay loop that makes these games fun. They test your ability to work with what you're given and roll with the punches. It doesn't matter what character or build you're running, The Binding of Isaac is going to feel like you're playing The Binding of Isaac. If it's twin-stick shooter combat doesn't appeal to you, then no amount of randomness will change that. We return to these old games to get a taste of gameplay that we're already familiar with and enjoy. That's why these current player charts are always dominated by multiplayer games. It's much easier to turn on the Switch and play a few games of Smash than it is to dive into an old 80-hour RPG. Fighting games are consistently some of the games that I have the most hours in, which is funny considering how little unique content these types of games usually offer. Choose a character, drain your opponent's health to 0. Now do that again, and again, and again. You can choose to do this casually, or sweat. Periodically hop in the lab and find ways to more efficiently drain your opponent's health to 0. That's it, that's the entire gameplay loop. But it's one that I really enjoy, so I can easily pour hundreds of hours into it. People don't hop onto Valorant looking for a novel experience. They know what to expect, and that's what keeps them playing. Where else are they gonna find Discord e-girls to send cringe-ass handpics to? Nobody's booting up League of Legends to be engrossed in a compelling narrative with crazy twists and turns. They do it because of self-hate and undiagnosed mental health issues. An addictive gameplay loop is really all that it takes to give something replayability. Even the single-player games that I most replay are because of how fun I find the gameplay. Now, bit of a hot take here. I don't really care much for the story in Souls games, at least not when I'm the one playing them. I follow quest lines and bits of lore as they pique my interest, but I'm not the type to comb over every single item description trying to piece it all together myself. I let this guy handle that. I come back to these games because I can't get enough of the Souls formula. I don't mind fighting the same 20 to 30 bosses if I'm a Souls combat enjoyer. You mean to tell me I gotta dodge roll and then R1? Again?
Why do you think I came all this way?
If a game's community really loves its gameplay, they'll create the replay value themselves. They'll add self-imposed limitations and attempt challenge runs. When I start to get too good at a Souls game, I start doing its bosses hitless. Of all of these games, Elden Ring has the hardest drop-off in quality following its initial playthrough. Being open world, a lot of the game's novelty comes from exploration, and you can't exactly re-explore the same map. My first completion clocked in at around 130 hours, but my last one just took a single stream. The start of every run has you running from set piece to set piece grabbing key items. The vast open land between legacy dungeons goes from opportunities to explore to mundane obstacles you gotta slog through to get to the main stuff. Ironically, what goes ignored the most in subsequent playthroughs is the side content. I'm not starting up another run because I missed random catacomb number 27 on my first run. I do it to scratch that FromSoft itch and maybe torture myself with some crazy challenges. Some of the most fun I've had with the game was the alphabetical boss run that I did for this channel. Despite all of the things that lose their novelty after a single playthrough, the core gameplay is still more than enough to keep fans playing. Replay value isn't something that needs to be built into every game. I would hate to see single-player games shoehorning in superfluous content or say that they take 500 hours to beat just for the sake of replayability. Most of my favorites are these single-player narrative-driven low replay value games. I don't see them as worse than something like Street Fighter because I play them for completely different reasons. Games built around delivering a single unforgettable experience do things that most gameplay-centric games can't, but this all comes at the cost of only being able to truly experience it once. You can never re-experience Sephiroth killing Aerith, fighting Soul of Cinder and hearing his theme play those 3 iconic notes, setting foot in the amusement park for the first time, watching the end credits roll for the 5th and final time. I think the highest praise you can give any piece of art is simply saying, man, I wish I could wipe my memory just so I could experience that again. For something to stick in your mind like that, to have such a profound effect on you in a way that you know you can never capture again, I think that's kind of beautiful in a way. The person we were when we first experienced something is another factor that makes those same highs unreachable. The Souls games might not be something that had a deep formative effect on me personally, but there's no shortage of "How Dark Souls Saved My Life" type video essays on YouTube. We can't recreate the same conditions under which we first played those games. A couple years ago, I copped another one of my all-time favorites, Portal 2, during a Steam sale. It had been a decade since I first played it, so I definitely didn't remember any of the puzzles, but the memories of how I felt playing the game remained vivid. I installed it to my drive, launched the game, played through the first level, and then never touched it again. I just had no motivation to revisit something that I already felt like was a closed chapter. Pair that with a backlog that never seems to get any shorter, and trying to recreate an existential crisis some silly little game gave me years prior becomes pretty low priority. I haven't even gotten around to most of this year's new releases. I just wrapped up my first playthrough of Final Fantasy VI, but I still haven't taken 16 out of the shrink wrap. Resident Evil 4 is collecting digital dust as I finally make my way through Resident Evil 2. Oh, y'all playing Tears of the Kingdom? Yeah, go on without me. I'll catch up with you soon. With limited time on this planet and even more limited free time, I'm content to leave my time with those games as just memories, no matter how rose-tinted they may be. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared to revisit my favorite media because I'm worried I might like them less. Of course, I don't think that I would hate the games after replaying them. They're not bad games, except for this one. I know this one's ass, I just don't care. But I would definitely notice a lot more flaws that I didn't pick up on the first time, and ultimately come out of it with an inferior experience because nothing is ever as you remember. 2 years ago, NieR Replicant, a prequel to Automata, was released. I copped it day one and man, what a great game. Right? I wouldn't know, I still haven't played it. I know it can't meet the impossible bar set by my memories of Automata, so I kinda just put it on the back burner indefinitely. One small problem, I really want to play this game. So I'll step out of my comfort zone and put my theory to the test. I'll play Replicant, followed by a replay of Automata, and see how my feelings about the game change. I don't see replay value ever being something I care about. Replayability is a design consideration built into certain games. Not every game wants to encourage multiple runs, making it a useless metric to apply universally. Some folks just don't care and break every rule. Even with the most unplayable linear games, you can always find a handful of people that have poured thousands of hours into them. But me, if I'm satisfied with my first completion, then as far as I'm concerned, that game has done its job, and I'm cool with never touching it again. For those who really want to, you can always go back and visit the game that you originally played. But what you can never do is re-experience the version of that game that exists in your memory. That's it for this video. See y'all in the next one.